While today's guest still enjoys quality independent living, at the age of 93, Dr. Ron Fitzgerald says that many years of retirement have provided him the opportunity to frequently review his thoughts on a range of relevant issues arising in the rapidly expanding field of aged care. On this matter, he says with utter conviction, let the vigorous exchange of positive ideas begin and continue. I look forward to the challenge. Very Churchillian. I love it. So, hello and welcome to another episode of Ironing Out the Wrinkles. I'm your host, Ros McMaster.
And I'm also your host, Cate Shaw. Together, we're taking the age out of ageism, helping men and women embrace life after 50 with less fear. Today, it is an honour to be joined by someone who refuses to be defined by a number, but we'll give him a number anyway. At 93 and a half years young, Dr. Ron Fitzgerald continues to live a very active, full and inspiring life. He still drives, has a weekly personal trainer, and is secretary of a community group. Ron has always appreciated the importance of good nutrition, continual learning, and the embracing of new ideas. And he readily welcomes opportunities to interact with people of every generation. I'm also very proud to disclose that Ron happens to be my father. He is the father of 6, grandfather of 14, and great-grandfather of 18. Retired in 1994 from the post of Director of the Public Policy Research and Development Centre at Deakin University, and previously, among other positions, was Commissioner for Education for the National Inquiry into Poverty. Ron holds a PhD in History and Sociology. He was the winner of a Churchill Scholarship in 1972. He has published several books and research papers, Poverty and Education in Australia being one such publication.
In this episode, Ron shares with us his secret to maintaining independence in later years, transitioning to living alone after his beloved partner of 60 years passed on, how he embraces change with a positive mindset when hit with many of life's tough challenges, and of course, the opportunity to have his say on aged care reforms, which of course hasn't been a lot of reform despite the inquiry of late. So Ron, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dad.
So mindset has proven to be a key factor in aging well. Actually, it's higher up the scale than diet. That's how important mindset is. So what's your mindset around getting older? When we spoke earlier, previous to the podcast, you said something about aging being a continuum. So do you want to speak some more about aging being a continuum?
Yes, I think that we should see aging as a process through life, beginning with the womb and ending with the tomb. Age, womb to tomb. That's how we should say it, as a continuum, not as any separate stage at all. So that's one different mindset we have to have if we're going to make any progress.
That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. At what point do you say I'm old now? It's literally just a continuum.
To continue. Well, you've got to keep growing. The thing is, we grow lots of things. We grow plants and other things. We haven't taken seriously growing people, who are the most precious of them all. And the more we look at people, we realize each one is unique and deserves to have the chance to fulfill that uniqueness, that design that somehow the Creator decided we'd all be unique. We're not robots, we're not part of a herd. And so we all have distinctive ways of behaving and thinking. And And that diversity really makes for a good society. The more diverse, as we know with, say, rainforests, once you start reducing the variety or the diversity of a rainforest, it begins to fall away. So we need to reward and to promote diversity among people, and facilitate that. Unfortunately, we gone in other directions, I think. But
Yes.
there's treating people as part of the herd, which is convenient for people selling things, for example, or TV numbers, etc. And but that's not really recognizing the distinctive elements in the human person's life. And I think that's a major shift we have to make, particularly if you're going to make sense of childcare in any productive way. Because the whole, like so many organizations, because we grew as a military command over a prison, after all, and the military command is vertical, straight down. Someone at the top gives orders, and the lowest down, they follow them out. That's the rationale. It's the cheapest way of organizing things, and that's why it's called cost efficient, because it does things as far as possible at the least cost. So that's another shift. We need to move to being cost effective and looking at what are the outcomes of whatever project we undertake, but no matter what it is. But that's a whole way of looking at the world. And the sooner we start, the better.
Absolutely. And I think, sorry, Ron,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, as far as being cost effective, that's why, older people are seen as not worth the investment financially, as we see from the money that's not being injected into aged care and aged care reforms. Older people have no value anymore. Well, that's how it's seen, isn't it?
Well, sadly, yes. Well, that's because we've shifted our priorities to making money. Making money now is perhaps the priority, and that discounts then other factors like quality of life, or what is the term now the economists are now using? Well, it really is quality of life. They've got a name for it, but the future government budgets are supposed to build in these personal factors that make for worthwhile living. So how they'll do that will be very fascinating to watch. It should be a revolution in thinking. Well-being. I think the budget mentions, the next budget will be framed, so they say, in terms of well-being. Now, what are the elements in well-being? It's a pretty large lot, isn't it?
Yes.
And one of those elements is choice. See, without choice, you have no dignity. You're slaves. And unfortunately, children meet that with schooling. They've sat down, they're told what to do and how to do it together, or even in small groups now. But what choices do they have? What choices do we want to promote? There's a whole new world there. And I think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. And what choices would you like there to be for the older generation as people get older?
Well, I think how they live and where they live. The nursing home model is again a medical military model, that doesn't allow very much choice. I mean, for example, how you live, how you spend the day, what food do you eat, what companions will you have, what activities. There should be a wide range as far as possible of all those things. But of course, we've set up nursing homes on the cheap. It's the cost efficient model, and it doesn't take account of people's individual needs or choices. So that's the fundamental shift we'll have to make. Now, some countries and some places too, even Australia, they promote a kind of sense of community living, and surely that's a step in the right direction. And again, the factor of choice has to come into that. So that's the mind shift that we need to make. And we're a little bit away from it at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, all things take time, don't they? And it starts with a discussion and someone being willing to do what needs to be done. But there's all sorts of research now and countries coming together to say that cities need to be designed around cross-generational living and designed differently. Yeah, because older people benefit from being around younger people, and there's so much young people can learn from the older generation instead of wanting to stick them in a home and out of sight, out of mind.
And vice versa, like in
Yeah.
Stockholm, they all live together. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a military model. That's what it is.
Sad.
They put people together and behave and follow the same
Dope you up.
program. Yeah, and that's what it takes away people's dignity. I mean, you end up, if you end up in a nursing home, it's one room, isn't it? Usually, you've moved from a residence, perhaps with several rooms at least, and you end up in one room, and then your activities revolve around that room. It's just too confining.
Yes.
Not bring the uniqueness of the person, I mean, every person is a work of art in the sense that they're unique. Every person's unique. They're a work of art, and we've got to appreciate the value of the person. That's a major shift. Every person is worthwhile. Every person deserves a chance to keep growing. Keep growing. It's not staged. You don't grow according to stages. If you plant something, you watch it grow, and that's the way it is.
Yes.
So I think we've got to do the same with people. You've got to help them grow in their own unique ways.
Yes. I think one of the biggest fears that people have as they get older is that they might end up in an aged care facility where loneliness and elder abuse and all sorts of things come into play. So, but they've also done studies that say older people, if they had a choice, they don't want to move in with their children either. So what would be your option if you reached a point where you couldn't enjoy independent living in your own home? What would you hope to see happen?
Well, I'd like a situation where I have the maximum degree of choice in terms of where I live, how I live, with whom I live, what sort of scope is there for various types of activities, and so on. And it ought to be dynamic. It ought to be reflecting that as you change, so the choices available to you change. And what's wrong with that? It does mean a much more sensitive approach to people, of course, and listening to them, which we're not very good at doing. We're not good at listening. We're not encouraged to listen. The reward system isn't geared to listening. It's being given to following whatever's the fashion of the time, whatever it is. So it's another fundamental shift.
Well, can I ask you about retirement, Dad? You retired at a time when reaching 65 was marked as retirement age, the era of thanks very much, here's a gold watch and a handshake. Was that your experience, and did you have a choice? Because many men back then struggled in a big way when they retired because identity was wrapped up in being the provider, and men typically had less social outlets to fall back on afterwards. So what was the transition to retirement like for you?
Oh, well, I was in a privileged position because I had a great deal of autonomy and choice as to what I did and how I did it. But that's rare. And when I retired, the expectation of life for males was still heading towards 70. The state actuaries for the superannuation schemes until about probably in the 1970s, they were geared to the male retiring, not making the age of 68.
Gosh.
The expectation that the person retiring would not live 3 years.
Wow.
And
Sad.
that's how the system was calculated, you see. Well, now males are living, I think, more like the mid-80s now. Now, there's a whole new world.
Yes.
It's crept up on us. We haven't been watching. We haven't been looking and listening. There's a whole new world there, and worth exploring with the people involved.
So the transition for you was all right? Did you?
Oh, well,
when did you actually retire?
I retired. Actually, I retired when I was approaching 65, only because I'd had enough, I suppose. The universities were bringing in foreign students, fee paying, so it was quite lucrative. Probably went into the Vice Chancellor's slush fund or whatever it was called. And but the extra effort to teach those foreign students fully was not made, and many of them were quite deficient in English skills. So I found that a little bit annoying. I think we could have done a lot better, and still could, by the way.
It became about the dollar again.
Yes. Oh, very much so, as we know.
Well, it always comes down to the dollar, doesn't it? Everything comes down to the dollar.
It does now.
Yeah,
it wasn't that
unfortunately.
bad, but now it's much worse now. Yes.
It's sad.
And the accountants, the bean counters, they once were backroom boys and girls, but now they're right up there. They're right up there, and it's a different world. So there's another shift we have to think about.
And Dad, how important is it for you to keep your mind and your physical body sharp and active?
Well, I think you owe it to yourself. We don't love ourselves. We're not encouraged to love ourselves. And that's ought to be number one, by the way. Even the old good book said, love your neighbor as yourself. So that assumes, you love yourself. Now it means you're patient, kind, and caring to yourself. Patient, kind, and caring to yourself. Now, we're not encouraged to do that.
Well, actually, Cate and I come from a time now where we are encouraged to, take care of ourselves and to love ourselves more. And I think you come from more of a generation where self-reflection and self-love and self-care was considered rather an indulgence, wasn't it? You know, there wasn't time for that back then. You know, people were busy getting on with life. But now it's very much everywhere where we're asked to do a lot more self-care. But it's moved the other way, I think, to becoming too self-indulgent.
Yes, narcissistic almost.
Yes, yeah. But that's
Yeah,
your philosophy now in taking care of yourself and living well in the continuum of aging. You're taking care of yourself.
yeah, and with the most fruitful behaviors being rewarded,
Yes.
and we don't do that. And pregnant with women, for example, if the research is showing, it's quite clearly now that the emotions of the mother are translated very closely to the child in the womb. And if those emotions are less than happy and sad or disturbed, that can affect the child's emotional life for lifelong. So we should regard mothers to be as very precious persons and treat it accordingly. I don't think we do. I don't know. I'm not an expert.
Well, I don't see that.
No,
No.
no. And it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
But
so lovely. Like, you know, we're doing a talk about aging and aging well, but you literally don't see age. You just have a care for all people, no matter
person,
their age, their
whoever.
sex, anything. Yeah.
Yes, well, the precious nature of every person.
Yes.
That should be the overbearing, the overweening attitude, I think, of society. But unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. However,
So, how do you keep your mind and your body sharp and active? We do
well,
know
of
you have a
course.
personal trainer.
Active. Well, I like gardening and walking and so on. But I would say I'm very privileged, to have a background of that. Many people don't. They live in a fairly regimented world, one way or another.
Although you
Now,
did have a
fortunately,
very
I
poor
think.
upbringing, Dad.
Pardon?
You had a very poor upbringing, like you weren't rich
Oh,
when you were
yes.
little.
I was born at the start of the Great Depression. It started in 1929 when I was born. Actually caused it, and so it was the World War II that turned the economy around. When Adolf Hitler started becoming very demanding for more land, so forth. Then they started to spend more money in armaments and so on, war economies, which we've been in since, by the way. We've been in a war economies since the late 1930s, and we continue to spend trillions every month around the world on weapons of destruction, which isn't a very bright, particularly with the planet under threat. It's not really the wisest course of action. That's where we are. You see, our mindsets have just been too rigid. So,
And do you
moments of
mind telling?
truth.
I know they're moments of truth, and I wanted to know whether you'd mind telling our listeners how this is a bit of a sad topic, but I know that a lot of people would love to know how you've coped when you lost your wife of 60 years and again your eldest son quite recently and your pets. So, how did you adjust to that? Like, how did you cope with that?
I'm not quite sure. Well, with my wife Pauline, she had been in my care, you could say, for several years, and she'd had enough. She'd really had enough of it, and she wanted to go. She's a very spiritual person. She wanted to go, and certainly did not want to end up in a nursing home. So in a sense, it was a kind of a happy event for her. And if you shared in her feeling, it was well, at least a tolerable event for the rest of us, because she was where she wanted to be, out of pain.
Yeah.
So with my son, well, I'm still coming to terms with that one.
But he had a lot of
Great
sickness, didn't he? He was in a lot of pain anyway, so at least with his cancer. So that was how I got through it, that he wasn't suffering anymore.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And so what do you do to move through your grief, Ron, do you think? Do you just have quiet moments of reflection, or?
And I think of the good times that you've had.
Yeah.
Many good times. That, of course, means you don't have them anymore, of course. You know, when you're, it's a sense of permanent loss, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's over. It's finished. There's no return. I think that's always a daunting.
Yeah, it is tough. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But that's life, isn't it? Life and death. You know, life and death. Yeah.
Well, death of the body anyway. I don't believe you ever die, but your body does. And a bit different. Yeah. Dad, have you personally ever experienced ageism?
Hard to know, isn't it? Probably not.
Oh, that's
Probably
good.
not.
Or I wonder if you just have a mindset that you wouldn't notice it anyway.
But I was in probably a professional field where it probably didn't matter, you know. Didn't matter.
And today, what about today?
Today, of course, we have reductions now in university staff. Previously, when it was expansionary, now it's reductionary, and that means the award of prizes and promotions. It comes in a whole set of new criteria, and I'm not sure how that works anymore. But it would be very difficult. Yeah, particularly for the people's tutors. They do most of the teaching at the least possible cost, the least possible respect, and they're young people. So there's another gap we have to bridge. I mean, we pay, well, someone pays, vice chancellors $1 million a year. $1 million a year?
Wow.
Good heavens. Well, it's worse in private industry, as we know.
What's important now, Dad, compared to what was important to your younger self? Like, what would you give your younger self advice about getting older?
I think compassion. I think
nice.
compassion, because we see so many people suffering, and the scale of that suffering we see increasing.
We do.
We have the prospect of, with climate change, of, say, famine. Now, famine has started to appear in Africa, for example. Water is also going to be a scarce commodity in many places. So many more people are suffering.
So we will need lots and lots of compassion, won't we? Not only for ourselves, but for everybody.
Compassion means to suffer with. It's patio, the Latin. Com means with. Patio, you suffer with people. That's what compassion means. Right. Suffer with them. And I think we need a lot more of it. But of course, it's not great for having a good time, though. Anyway.
And with the recent recommendations made by the Royal Commission, what would you like to see done? And is there anything that you think they've left out of the report?
Royal Commission into Aged Care?
I think they've looked. I don't think they've looked at the matter of choice very much. I don't think they've looked very much at the different environments in which people could live. With choice, how and where you would like to live. So you keep growing. See, the whole thing should be to promoting the continual growth of people. And we wouldn't have these huge medical bills anymore. I mean, many of these diseases, some people say 60%, are preventable. Well, we have did I see a figure like a third of people are suffering with chronic disease in one way or another. Now, think of the cost of that, not just the human cost, of course, but also the financial cost. And it's getting worse. And the postural model is the military model, see. It's not a person-sensitive model. And there we are.
Yeah,
We
it's a
can't
shame they
afford to
didn't.
go on like this.
Your poverty report was very interesting. That would have helped a lot, wouldn't it?
Well, the government was removed, shall we say, and their successors didn't believe poverty existed. So all that work was pigeonholed.
Right. Gee. I see.
And the main one we wanted was the guaranteed minimum income, which would give people choices.
It would.
And that wouldn't take off. It hasn't taken off, but it should take off, because we wouldn't need armies of bureaucrats and people doing jobs they don't want to be doing. No, I can't see that happening yet.
So what's next on the agenda for you, Ron, just as we wrap up?
I think taking a more frequent and deeper interest in the well-being. I think well-being now that the federal budget is now going to be couched in those terms, I think we should all be focused on what constitutes well-being, and how do we promote that? How do we promote a sense of general and personal well-being?
So maybe you can be the promoter of it, because you're 93 and you have the personal trainer and you're into the whole person. Never too old.
No.
Take a lot of energy.
Oh, no. Not into politics, thank you. No. No. This is a very political.
Yeah, true.
Well, yeah, you're right. However, we live in hope.
You've got to have hope. Hope and love.
Yes.
We live in hope.
Love. Yes.
Yes.
Of all. Yeah.
We were hoping we're having one of our guests is a philosophy student, and he's written a paper on the state of aged care in Australia, and he used to work in the aged care area. So we thought it would be quite fascinating to get the two of you on a podcast where you can debate the situation with aged care at the moment. We thought that would be that'd be quite fun.
Yeah, if you're up to it.
Stage.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're still keen to keep your mind sharp, and you've still got plenty of ideas.
So much. Well, we're living in a time of profound change now. The world is being transformed before our eyes.
Exciting.
Not only in climate, but in every other way you think of. Yeah. And we have to keep adapting. You adapt or die. Like plants, they adapt or die. We're a plant, and animals too, but we adapt or die. And people should be helped now to adapt to these changing circumstances. However.
Yeah.
There's good things coming out into the world too then. Yeah, technology.
So, There are possibilities. Yeah, sure.
So you would have seen a lot of changes, Ron, in your 93 years. Do you think we're in a better place generally around the world, or have things not really changed? Like, we've replaced bad things with good things, but then other things are a negative now. So are we the same really, or is the world a better place?
Well, I think our heroes have been people who make money, people, so-called celebrities. They're celebrities, perhaps not because of their talent. Some are very talented, we know. But they're celebrities primarily because they make money, make a lot of money. And so long, if that is the criterion for success, then we're all impoverished.
We're in trouble.
We're all
Yeah.
We're in trouble. I think that's something that really has to shift. We shouldn't be holding up people in terms of how much money they've made. But anyway,
all right.
That's for you people to solve.
So if we've got any listeners who are struggling with the thought of getting older, what would be your one piece of advice to them?
The one piece of advice: love yourself. Love yourself. Start there. Love yourself. Be kind, caring, and patient with yourself. Because you are unique. Every person is unique and deserves to be treated accordingly. It's no good to compare ourselves to other people. We're not other people. We're ourselves. So I'd say to people, value yourself, love yourself, and try and, as far as possible, adapt to all these changes that are being foisted on us now. Yeah, and keep growing. Just try and keep growing. It's a way that, in ways that mean something to you.